are doing well. It's Aliyah. I'm going to be reading chapter 8 of the Neverending Story, so grab your books. Chapter 8 The Wind Giants. High in the air rode Atreyu, his red cloak flowing behind him. His blue-black hair fluttered in the wind. With steady, wave-like movements, Falkor, the white luck dragon, glided through the mist and tatters of the clouds. Up and down, up and down, and up and down. How long had they been flying? For days and nights and more days, Atreyu had lost track. The dragon had the gift of flying in his sleep. Further and further they flew. Sometimes Atreyu drowsed off, clinging fast to the dragon's white mane. But it was only a light, restless sleep, and more his waking became a dream, all hazy and blurred. Shadowy mountains passed below him, lands and seas, islands and rivers. Atreyu had lost interest in them and gave up trying to hurry Falkor, as he had done on his first leaving the southern oracle. For then he had been impatient, thinking it a simple matter for one with a dragon to ride, to reach the border of Fantastica and cross it to the outer world. He had to know how very large Fantastica was. Now he had to fight the leading wilderness that was trying to overpower him. His eyes, once as keen as a young eagle, had lost this distant vision. From time to time he would pull himself upright and try to look around, but then he would sink back and stare straight ahead at the dragon's long, supple body and its pearly pink and white scales. Falkor was tired too. His strength, which had seemed inexhaustible, was running out. More than once in the course of their long flight, they had seen below them spots which the nothings had invaded, and which gave them the feeling that they were going blind. Seen from the height, many of these spots seemed relatively small, but others were as big as whole countries. Fear gripped the luck dragon and his rider, and at first they changed direction to avoid looking at the horror. But, strange as it may seem, horror loses its power to frighten when repeated too often. And since the patches of nothing became more and more frequent, the travelers were very gradually getting used to them. They had been flying in silence for quite some time when suddenly Falkor's bronze bell tone rang out. Atreyu, my little master, are you sleeping? No, said Atreyu, though actually had been caught up in a terrifying dream. What is it, Falkor? I've been wondering if it wouldn't be wiser to turn back. Turn back? Where to? To the ivory tower, to the childlike empress. You want us to go to her empty-handed? I wouldn't call it empty-handed, Atreyu. What was your mission? To discover the cause of her illness and find out what would cure it. But, said Falkor, nothing was said about you bringing her the cure. What do you mean? Maybe it's a mistake trying to cross the border of Fantastica in search of a human. I don't see what you're diving at, Falkor. Explain yourself. The childlike empress is deadly sick, said the dragon. Because she needs a new name, Morla and the aged one told you that. But only a human, only a child of a man from the outer world can give her this name. Udala told you that. So you're actually completed your mission. It seems to me that you should let the childlike empress know as soon as possible. But it wouldn't do her a bit of good, Atreyu protested, unless I bring her the human who can save her. Don't be so sure, said Falkor. She has been greater power than you or I. Maybe she would have no difficulty in bringing a human to Fantastica. Maybe has her ways that are unknown to you and me and everyone else in Fantastica. But do so, she needs to know what you have found. And if that's the way it is, there's no point in our trying to find a human on our own. She might even die while we're looking. Maybe if we turn back in time, we can save her. Atreyu made no answer. The dragon could be right, he reflected, but then he could be wrong. If he went back now with his message, the childlike empress might very well say, What good does that do to me? And now it's too late to send you out again. He didn't know what to do, and he was tired, much tired to decide anything. You know, Falcor, he said, hardly above a whisper. You may be right, or you may be wrong. Let's fly out a little further. Then, if we haven't come to a border, we'll turn back. What do you mean for a little further? The dragon asked. A few hours, Atreyu murmured. Oh well, just 1 hour. All right, said Falcor, just 1 hour. But that 1 hour was 1 hour too many. They had noticed that the sky in the north was black with clouds. In the west, the sky was aflame, and ugly-looking clouds hung down on the horizon like seaweed. In the east, the storm was rising like a blanket of gray lead. And all around it, there was tatters of clouds that looked like blue ink blots. And from the south came a sulfur yellow mist, streaking with lightning. We seem to be getting in bad weather, said Falcor. Atreyu looked in all directions. Yes, he said, it looks bad, but we can fly. But what we can do, but fly on. It would be more sensible, said Falcor, to look for shelter. If this is what I think, it's no joke. What do you think? Atreyu asked. I think it's the four wind giants starting one of their battles. They're almost always fighting to see which is the strongest and should rule over the others. To them, it's a sort of game because they have nothing to fear. But God help anyone who gets caught in their little tent. Can't you fly higher? Atreyu asked. Beyond their reach, you mean? No, I can't fly that high. And as far as I can see, there's nothing but water below us. Some enormous ocean. I don't see any place to hide in. Then, said Atreyu, well, we'll just have to wait till they get here. Anyway, there's something I want to ask. What? Cried the dragon, so terrified that he jumped, in a manner of speaking, sky high. If they are the four wind giants, Atreyu explained, they must know all the four corners of Fantastica. If anyone can tell us where the borders are, it's them. Good Lord, cried the dragon. You think you can just stop and chat with the wind giants? What are their names? Atreyu asked. The one from the north, said Falcor, is called Lear. The one from the east, Burreo. The one from the south, Shrika. And the one from the west is May Israel. But tell me, Atreyu, what are you? Are you a little boy or a bar of iron? How come you're not afraid? When I passed through the Sphinx Gate, Atreyu replied, I lost all my fears. And besides, I'm wearing the emblem of the childlike princess. Everyone in Fantastica respects it. Why shouldn't the wind giants? Oh, they will, cried Falcor. They will. But they're stupid, and nothing can make them stop fighting one another. You'll see. Meanwhile, the storm clouds from all four directions had converged. It seemed to Atreyu that he was at the center of a huge funnel, which was revolving faster and faster, mixing the sulfur yellow, the leading gray, the blood red, and the deep black all together. He and his white dragon were spun around in a circle like a matchstick in great whirlpool. And then they saw the wind giants. Actually, all he saw was faces because their limbs kept changing in every possible way, from long to short, from clear cut to misty, and they were so knotted together in the monstrous free-for-all that it was impossible to make out their real shapes, or even how many of them there were. The faces were constantly changing. Now they were round and puffy, now stretched from top to bottom or from side to side, but all times they could be torn apart. They opened their mouths and bellowed and roared and howled and laughed at one another. They didn't even seem to notice the dragon and his rider, who were gnats in comparison to the wind giants. Atreyu raised himself as high as he could. With his right hand he reached for the golden Aliyah on his chest and shouted at the top of his lungs, I am the name of the childlike empress. Be still and silent. And the unbelievable happened. As though suddenly stricken dumb, they fell silent. Their mouths closed, and 8 gigantic Google eyes were directed at Atruan. The tempest stopped, and the air was deathly still. Answer me, said Atreyu. What are the borders of Fantastica? Do you know them, Lear? Not in the north, said the black cloud face. And you, Boreo? Not in the east, said the lean gray cloud face. You tell me, Shriek. There is no border in the south, said the sulphur yellow cloud face. Maestro, do you know? No border in the west, said the fiery red cloud face. And then they all spoke with one mouth. Who are you? What bear the emblem of the childlike princess, empress? And don't the Fantasticas have borders? And don't know that Fantastica has no borders? Atreyu made no reply. He was stunned. It had never occurred to him that Fantastica might have no borders whatsoever, that his whole quest had been for nothing. He hardly noticed it when the Wind Giants resumed their war game. He had given up caring what had happened to him. He clung fast to the dragon's mane when they were hurled upward by the whirlwind. The lightning played around them. They were spun in a circle and almost drowned in a downpour of rain. They were stuck into a fiery wind that nearly burned them up. But a moment later, a hailstorm consisting not of stones, but of sickles as long as spears, flung them downward. So it went up and down, and up and down, this way and that way. The Wind Giants were fighting for power. A gust of wind turned Falcor over on his back. Hold tight, he shouted. But it was too late. Atreyu had lost his hold and fell. He fell, and he lost consciousness. When he came to, Atreyu was lying on white sand. He heard the sounds of waves, and when he looked around, he saw that he had been washed up on a beach. It was a gray, foggy day, but there was no wind. The sea was calm, and there was no sign that the Wind Giants had been fighting a battle only a short time before. The beach was flat, and there was no hills or rocks in sight. Only a few gnarls and crooked trees, which, seen through the mist, looked like a great clawed hands. Atreyu sat up. Seeing his red buffalo hair cloak a few strips away, he crawled over to it and threw it over his shoulder. To his surprise, it was almost dry, so he must have been lying there for quite a while. How had he gotten there? Why hadn't he drowned? Dimly he remembered arms that had carried him, and strange singing voices. Poor child, beautiful child, hold on, don't let him go under. Perhaps it had only been the sounds of waves, or could it have been sea nymphs and water sprites. Probably they had only seen the glory, and that was why they had saved him. Involuntarily, he reached out for an amulet. It was gone. For the amulet, it was gone. There was no chain around his neck. He had lost the gem. Falcor, he shouted as loud as he could. He jumped up and ran back and forth, shouting in all directions. Falcor! Falcor! Where are you? No answer came, only the slow, steady sounds of the waves breaking against the beach. Heaven only knew where the Wind Giants had driven the white dragon. Maybe Falcor was looking for his little master in an entirely different place, miles and miles away. Maybe he wasn't even alive. No longer was Atreyu a dragon rider, and no longer was the childlike empress messenger, and no longer was he the childlike empress messenger. He was only a little boy, all alone. The clock in the belfry struck 6, but then it was dark outside. The rain had stopped, not a sound to be heard. Bastion stared in the candle flames. Then he gave a start. The floor had creaked. He thought he heard something breathing. He held his breath and listened. Except for the small circle of light shed by the candles, it was dark in the big attic. Didn't he hear soft steps on the stairs? Hadn't the handle of the attic door moved ever so slowly? Again the floor creaked. What if there was ghosts in the attic? Nonsense, said Bastion, none too loudly. There's no such thing. Everyone knows that. Then, why were there so many stories about them? Maybe all the people who said ghosts don't exist are just afraid to admit they do. Atreyu wrapped himself up tight in his red cloak, for he was cold and started inland. The country, as far as he could see through the fog, was flat and monstrous. The only change he noticed as he strolled along was the appearance among the stunted trees of bushes, which looked as if they were made of rusty sheets metal and were almost as hard. You could easily hurt yourself brushing against them if you weren't careful. About an hour later, Atreyu came to a road paved with bumpy, irregular-shaped stones. Thinking it was bound to lead somewhere, he decided to follow it, but preferred to walk on the soft ground beside the bumpy pavement stones. The road kept twisting and turning, though it was hard to see why, for there was no signs of any hill, pond, or stream. In the part of the country, everyone seemed to be crooked. Atreyu hadn't been skirting the road for very long when he heard a strange thumping sound. It was far away, but coming closer. It sounded like the muffled beat of a big drum. In between beats, he heard a tinkling of bells and a shrill piping that could have been made by flies. He hid behind a bush by the side of the road and waited to see what would happen. Slowly, the strange music came closer, and then the first shapes emerged from the fog. They seemed to be dancing, but it was a dance without charm or gaiety. The dancers jumped gracefully, rolled on the ground, crawled on all fours, leapt in the air, and carried on like crazy people. But all Atreyu could hear was the slow, muffled drum beats, the shrill frills, and the whimpering and panting from the many throats. More and more figures appeared. The procession seemed endless. Atreyu looked at the dancers' faces. They were ash gray and bathed in sweat, and their eyes had a wild, feverish glow. Some of the dancers lashed themselves with whips. They're mad, Atreyu thought, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. The procession consisted mostly of night hops, glow-bulbs, and ghosts. There were vampires as well, and quite a few witches, old ones with great humps and beards, but also young ones who looked beautiful and wicked. If he had had the Arwen, he would have approached them and asked what was going on. As it was, he preferred to stay in his hiding place until the mad procession had passed and the last stragglers vanished, hopping and lemming in the fog. Only then did he venture out to the road and look after the ghostly procession. Should he follow them? He couldn't make up his mind. But by that time, to tell the truth, he didn't know if there were anything that he should or should not do. For the first time, he was fully aware of how much he needed the childlike Empress's amulet and how helpless he was without it. And not only or even mainly because of the protection it had given him, it was thanks to his own strength. And after all, that he had stood up in all the harsh and not only or even mainly because of the protection it had given him, it was thanks to his own strength, after all, that he had stood up to all the hardships and terrors and the loneliness of his quest. But as long as he could carry the emblem, he had never been as lost as what to do. Like a mysterious compass, it had guided his thoughts in the right direction. And now that was changed. Now he had no secret power to lead him. He had no idea what to do, but he couldn't bear to stand there as though paralyzed. So he made himself follow the muffled drumming, which could still be heard in the distance. While making his way through the fog, always careful to keep a suitable distance between himself and the last stragglers, he tried to put his thoughts in order. Why, oh why haven't he listened to when Falkor advised him to fly straight to the childlike Empress? He would have brought her Eula's message and returned the gem. Without Urin and without Falkor, he would never be able to reach her. She wouldn't wait for him until her last moments, hoping he would come, trusting him to save her in Fantastica, but in vain. That in itself was bad enough, but still worse was he had learned from the wind giants that Fantastica had no borders. If there was no way of leaving Fantastica, had no if there was no way of leaving Fantastica, then it would be impossible to call in a human from across the border. Because Fantastica was endless, its end was inevitable. But while he was stumbling over the bumpy pavement stones in the fog, Eulalia's gentle voice resounded in his memory, and a spark of hope was kindled in his heart. Lots of humans have come to Fantastica in the past and given the childlike empress glorious new names. That's what she had sung. So there was a way from the one world to another. For them it is near, but for us too far. Never can we go out to them. Yes, those were Eulalia's words. Humans, the childs of man, have forgotten their way, but mine just one of them, a single one, remember? His own hopeless situation mattered little to Atreyu. What mattered was that a human should hear Fantastica's cry of distress and come to the rescue, as it had happened many times before. Perhaps one had already started out and was on its way. Yes, yes, Baskin shouted. Then, terrified from his own voice, he added more softly, I'd go and help you if I knew how. I don't know, Atreyu. I honestly don't. The murmured drum beats and the shrill piping had stopped. Without noticing, Atreyu had come so close to the procession that he almost ran into the last straggler. Since he was barefoot, his steps were silenced, but that wasn't why those creatures took no notice of him. He could have been stomping with high nail boots and shouting at the top of his lungs without attracting their attention. But by the time the procession had broken up and the spooks were scattered over a large muddy field interspersed with gray grass, some swayed from side to side, others stood or sat motionless. But in all their eyes there were a feverish glow, and they were all looking in the same direction. Then Atreyu saw what they were staring at in fascinated horror. On the far side of the field lay the nothing. It was the self-same nothing that had been seen from the bark trolls' treetops, or on the plain where the magic gates of the southern oracle had stood, or looking down from Falkor's back, but up until then he had always seen it from a distance. This time it was close by. It cut across the entire landscape and was coming slowly but irresistibly closer. Atreyu saw that the spooks in the field ahead of him were twitching and quivering. Their limbs were composed and their mouths were wide open, as though they had wanted to scream or laugh, though not a sound came out of them. And then all at once, like leaves driven by a gust of wind, they rushed towards the nothings. They leaped, they rolled, they flung themselves into it. The last of the ghostly crowd had just finished when Atreyu felt his horror that his own body was beginning to take short, compulsive steps in the direction of the nothing. He felt drawn to it by an unreasoning desire and embraced his will against it. He commanded himself to stand still. Slowly, very slowly, he managed to turn around and step by step. And though bucking a powerful current to struggle for it, the force of the attraction weakened and he ran with all his might over the bumpy paving stones. He slipped, fell, picked himself up, and ran on. He had no time to wonder where this foggy road would lead him. He followed the senseless twists and turns of the road until high-pitched black ramparts appeared in the fog ahead of him. Behind them, several crooked towers jutted into the gray sky. The heavy wooden winds of the town gated was rotting away and hung loose on rusty hinges. Atreyu went in. It was growing colder and colder in the attic. Baston's teeth were chattering. What if he should get sick? What would become of him? He might come down with pneumonia, like Willie, a boy in his class. Then he would die all alone in his attic. There'd be no one to help him. He'd have been very glad just to have his father come and save him. But go home? No, he couldn't. He'd rather die. He took the rest of the army blankets and wrapped them around him. After a while, he felt warmer. And that is the end of chapter 8. I hope you guys enjoyed your reading. Tune in tomorrow for chapter 9.